Imagine a tiny wooden fishing boat bobbing gently on the sun-drenched turquoise waters of the Caribbean. The only sound is the rhythmic lap of waves against the hull, maybe the cry of a distant seabird. Below the surface, vibrant coral reefs teem with life, a kaleidoscope of color. Above, the sky is a flawless canvas of blue, stretching endlessly towards a horizon where the ocean meets the heavens. This is the world of Leo and Clara, a husband and wife, whose lives are as simple and predictable as the tides. For decades, they've woken before dawn, cast their nets, and returned with the day's bounty, their existence a testament to the quiet dignity of hard work and the endless generosity of the sea. But today, the sea is not generous. Today, the sea is a liar. It holds a secret, a metallic leviathan, colder than any deep current, darker than any midnight trench. This isn't just a big fish. This isn't a lost cargo container. This is something else entirely, something impossible, something that doesn't belong here, not in these tranquil waters, not in this peaceful time. Because tangled in their nets, a colossal shadow, a hulking metal beast, a silent predator from a forgotten war, is about to drag them, and perhaps the entire world, into a mystery so profound, so dangerous. It threatens to tear apart the fabric of their quiet lives and shatter the very notion of what can truly remain hidden beneath the waves. How could a simple Caribbean fisherman and his wife possibly catch a submarine? And what deadly secrets did this Soviet spy from the Cold War carry, waiting to be unleashed? Leo woke before the first hint of orange touched the eastern sky. Years of habit had ingrained the rhythm of the sea into his bones. His wife, Clara, was already up, a small flame flickering from their humble stove as she brewed strong coffee and prepared their sparse breakfast. Their tiny home, perched precariously on stilts over the lapping water, smelled of salt, fish, and the earthy aroma of roasting plantains. Today was like any other day, a continuation of a pattern that stretched back generations. They were simple folk, their lives intertwined with the ebb and flow of the ocean. Their boat, the sea serpent, was small, stout, and fiercely loved. It was their livelihood, their connection to the world, and today it would become their unwitting accomplice in one of history's most baffling maritime discoveries. They pushed off just as the sun began to paint the sky in fiery hues. The air was warm, humid, carrying the scent of blooming night jasmine from the shore. Clara steered, her hand steady on the tiller, her gaze sweeping the horizon, while Leo, silent and focused, began to prepare their lines. They didn't use fancy sonar or GPS. Their knowledge came from generations of fishermen, passed down through whispers and observations. They knew the currents, the feeding grounds, the subtle shifts in water temperature that signaled where the best catch would be. Today, they were heading for a reef known for its snapper and grouper, a place they'd visited 1,000 times. But as they approached the familiar coordinates, something felt off. The water, usually so clear, seemed to hold a strange, murky quality. The surface shimmered with an unusual oily film in places, catching the sunlight in unsettling rainbows. Clara pointed to a patch of water where the birds were notably absent. "Leo," she said, her voice a low murmur, "the sea is quiet today, too quiet." Leo nodded, his brow furrowed. He felt it too, a subtle wrongness in the air, a tension that belied the calm surface. The usual chatter of gulls was missing, replaced by a profound, almost eerie silence. Even the gentle lapping of the waves against the sea serpent seemed muted, swallowed by the vast emptiness around them. Still, they had a living to make. Leo meticulously baited his hooks, attaching the heavy lead weights, preparing his hand lines. He cast them over the side, feeling the familiar weight as the line plunged into the depths. He waited, his fingers attuned to the slightest tremor, the most subtle tug. Minutes stretched into a strange, expectant silence. Then it happened. Not a tug, not a gentle pull, but a sudden, violent wrench. The line, thick as a man's thumb, went taut, stretching like a guitar string, singing with a low, ominous hum. Leo, a man of formidable strength, grunted, bracing himself. "Big one, Clara." He called out, his voice laced with the thrill of the chase. He started to pull hand over hand, his muscles straining, but this was no fish. The resistance wasn't the thrashing, desperate fight of a marlin or a shark. This was something else. A dead weight, immense and unyielding, that began to pull the boat. Slowly, inexorably, the sea serpent began to move, not under its own power but dragged backward by the unseen force below. Clara rushed to help, grabbing another line that had also gone rigid. Panic began to claw at them. This wasn't fishing, this was a struggle for control. The lines were cutting into their hands, burning with friction. Sweat poured down their faces, mingling with the salt spray. The sun beat down relentlessly, making the struggle even more desperate. The boat was being pulled faster now, away from the reef, towards open water. They risked capsizing or worse, being dragged under. "Cut it!" Clara yelled, her voice raw with fear. "Leo, cut the lines, we'll lose the boat." But Leo, stubborn as the island rock, shook his head, his jaw set. His father had taught him never to give up on a catch, no matter how big, no matter how hard the fight. This wasn't just a fish, he knew it. This was something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. He had to know what it was. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to let go, but an even deeper instinct, a primal curiosity mixed with a fisherman's defiance, held him fast. He looped a rope around a sturdy cleat, using the boat's own stability to help anchor the line. The small wooden vessel groaned and protested, its planks straining, but it held. For what felt like an eternity, they were towed, helpless, across the placid sea. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. They didn't speak, only struggled, pulling, adjusting, trying to keep the sea serpent upright as the invisible force beneath them continued its relentless, silent journey. They passed other fishing boats, their occupants staring in disbelief at the sight of Leo and Clara, two figures locked in a desperate, silent battle with an unseen behemoth that was dragging their boat as if it were a toy. No one dared approach. The sheer strangeness of the scene, the palpable tension radiating from the sea serpent, kept them at bay. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in soft purples and oranges, the pulling slowed. The massive weight below seemed to settle, to finally come to a rest. Exhausted, muscles screaming, Leo and Clara slumped against the gunwales, gasping for breath. But the mystery remained. What was it? A sunken freighter, a colossal whale caught in a fishing net it shouldn't have encountered. As the last light faded, plunging the sea into an inky blackness, a new fear took hold. They were far from shore, adrift, tethered to an unknown entity in the vast, unforgiving ocean. The moon rose, a brilliant silver disk, casting an ethereal glow upon the water. In its shimmering light, Leo and Clara squinted, trying to discern the nature of their catch. The line stretched down into the blackness, disappearing into an abyss. Then a dark shape began to materialize slowly, painstakingly beneath the surface. Not a fish, not a whale, too long, too sleek, too geometric. It was massive, far larger than any natural creature. It was long, cylindrical, a silent metallic leviathan, seemingly without end. It looked like a cigar, but a cigar carved from some impossible dark material, scarred by time and the ocean's embrace. Barnacles clung to its surface like ancient jewelry, and strands of seaweed draped over its curves like mournful hair. The first streaks of dawn painted the sky in soft pastels as Leo and Clara, still reeling from their discovery, found a renewed surge of energy. They knew they couldn't cut it loose. This wasn't just a discovery. It was an event, something that demanded to be seen, to be understood. With a shared, silent resolve, they began the arduous task of slowly, carefully towing their impossible catch towards the nearest island. It took hours, a grueling, slow-motion journey across the calm morning sea. The sea serpent, despite its size, strained against the immense bulk, its engine roaring in protest. As they drew closer to their small fishing village, word had already spread like wildfire. Other boats, their engines sputtering with a mix of awe and disbelief, converged on the sea serpent. Fishermen, their faces etched with a lifetime of sun and sea, stared, pointing, murmuring amongst themselves. Children, usually running wild on the beaches, stood hushed, eyes wide with wonder and fear. When the dark, imposing silhouette finally broke the surface fully, gliding like a phantom into the shallow waters of the bay, a collective gasp rippled through the gathered crowd. It was bigger than anything they had ever seen. Not just a boat, not just a ship, but a true leviathan. Its dark gray hull, encrusted with barnacles and algae, stretched what seemed like 100 feet, maybe more, in silent, imposing majesty. The metal gleamed dully under the growing sunlight, reflecting the sky in a distorted, ominous mirror. Its design was sleek, powerful, clearly built for speed and stealth. The massive propeller, half submerged, looked like a monstrous metallic fan blade. There were no obvious hatches, no signs of life, just the silent, brooding presence of an enormous, abandoned machine. It was a metal whale, but one forged in the fires of human ambition and fear. People murmured, "What is it? An old shipwreck?" No, too new, too different. A few brave souls, fueled by curiosity and the safety of numbers, started paddling canoes closer, their faces a mixture of fear and fascination. Leo, exhausted but strangely exhilarated, steered the sea serpent expertly, guiding the colossal object towards a section of the beach where the water was just deep enough to keep it afloat but shallow enough to prevent it from submerging completely. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the scene in bright, tropical light, more details became visible. The streamlined conning tower, housing what looked like a periscope and other instruments, was a dark, forbidding shape. Along its sides, strange alien markings appeared. Not English, not Spanish, not French or any language the islanders recognized. They were sharp, angular characters, unlike anything seen in their small, connected world. A few elderly men who remembered tales from their grandfathers about distant wars and foreign powers squinted, a flicker of recognition in their eyes. "It's Russian," one old man whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes wide with a dawning terror. "The language of the Soviets." The word hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement that silenced the murmuring crowd. Soviet. The name invoked images of distant, powerful empires, of a global struggle that felt a million miles away from their tranquil lives. But now it was here, beached on their shores, an uninvited, silent guest. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a mysterious derelict. This was a war machine, a tool of a global superpower designed for covert operations, for lurking in the shadows, for projection of silent power. What was a Soviet submarine doing in the Caribbean? The Cold War, while perhaps a distant rumble in their peaceful lives, was a reality. Cuba was nearby, a constant reminder of the fragile balance of power. The Cuban Missile Crisis, though years passed, was still a ghost in the collective memory, a moment when the world held its breath. Clara, her initial fear giving way to a fierce protectiveness of her home, looked at Leo. "Are there people inside?" She asked, her voice tight. The idea was terrifying. Was it a tomb? Was it still active? The silence emanating from the massive hull was absolute, unnerving. No lights, no sounds, no signs of life. It was a steel sarcophagus, carrying who knew what secrets within its cold, metallic belly. News travels fast, even in remote islands. Within hours, the local authorities arrived, a handful of bewildered policemen and a government official, their faces a mixture of disbelief and utter confusion. They had never dealt with anything like this. A fishing dispute, a shipwreck, a missing person, these were their usual calls. But a submarine, a Soviet submarine. It was beyond their scope, beyond their WILDEST imagination. They tried to cordon off the area, but the sheer size of the object and the growing crowd made it impossible. The discovery immediately escalated. Calls were made, relayed through crackling radio connections, up the chain of command, from the local constabulary to the national government, and then, inevitably, beyond their borders. The whispers of Soviet had become shouts, and the international community began to stir. This wasn't just a local curiosity anymore. This was a geopolitical event, a Cold War mystery, washing ashore in the most unexpected of places. The Cold War was not a hot war, not in the traditional sense, but it was a battle nonetheless, a battle of ideologies, of political wills, and perhaps most crucially of intelligence. It was a chess game played on a global scale, with every move, every secret carrying the weight of potential annihilation. And in this shadowed conflict, the submarine was king. Silent, deadly, capable of vanishing without a trace, It was the ultimate tool for espionage, for projecting power, for gathering intelligence right under the nose of the enemy. The Caribbean during this tense period was a simmering cauldron of international intrigue. The proximity of Cuba, a communist outpost just 90 miles from Florida, made the region a critical flashpoint. American destroyers patrolled the waters, Soviet spy ships were commonplace, and underneath it all, the submarines, both American and Soviet, played a dangerous game of cat and mouse. They were the silent hunters, the unseen eyes, charting enemy movements, mapping shorelines, listening to coded communications. A Foxtrot-class submarine like the one Leo and Clara found was a workhorse of the Soviet fleet, designed for long-range patrols, for deep dives, and for staying hidden. They were armed, yes, but their primary weapon was stealth and their ability to gather vital information. So, the appearance of such a vessel, years after the height of the Cold War, abandoned and derelict in the relatively shallow waters of a Caribbean island, was not just an anomaly, it was an historical paradox. These were machines built to be invisible, to leave no trace. They were the ultimate ghost in the machine. Their crews were highly trained, dedicated to maintaining absolute secrecy. For a Foxtrot to simply wash up like a piece of driftwood defied every principle of naval operations, every rule of covert espionage. The initial reports from the naval experts who swarmed the scene painted a picture of baffling contradictions. The submarine was largely intact. There were no obvious signs of battle damage, no gaping holes from a torpedo, no massive structural collapse indicating a deep-sea implosion. It looked, for all intents and purposes, as if it had simply stopped. Its propulsion system was offline, its batteries dead, its systems inert. But the real mystery wasn't just how it got there, but why it was abandoned. Where was the crew? A submarine, especially a military one, is a self-contained world, a steel womb for its crew. It's designed to keep them alive, often for months, in the most hostile environment on Earth. For a crew to abandon such a vessel, it would have to be an act of extreme desperation. Fire, flooding, a catastrophic system failure, or something far more sinister. The absence of any distress signals, any international alarms raised by the Soviet Union regarding a lost submarine in the region, only deepened the enigma. Governments, even during the Cold War, generally reported lost military assets, if only to manage potential international incidents. But for this vessel, there was only silence. The very air around the beached submarine felt heavy with the unspoken. Locals whispered tales of a ghost sub, a cursed vessel carrying the souls of its lost crew. The more pragmatic experts spoke of mechanical failure, perhaps a silent, unrecoverable breakdown far out at sea, leaving the crew with no option but to scuttle the vessel and escape if they could. But if they escaped, where did they go? No reports of a mass rescue, no foreign sailors appearing mysteriously on shore. The sea, famously, gives up its dead, but rarely its secrets so completely. As investigators cautiously began their preliminary surveys, the story of the submarine began to take on an even more chilling dimension. Was this a relic of a secret mission gone horribly wrong? Had it been engaged in some deep-cover intelligence operation, perhaps observing American naval movements, or even attempting to establish a clandestine supply line to a regional ally? The Cold War was rife with such shadowy endeavors, many of which remain classified to this day. This submarine could be a physical manifestation of one such forgotten, or deliberately suppressed, incident. The implications for the present were also unsettling. Could there be sensitive documents, cryptographic equipment, or even dangerous ordnance still on board? A Soviet submarine was a mobile fortress of Cold War technology, and its unpiloted presence raised alarms in intelligence agencies worldwide. The small Caribbean island had, overnight, become a focal point for international concern, a quiet battleground for the echoes of a conflict that was supposed to be over. The discovery of the Foxtrot-class submarine wasn't just a local sensation, it was a global earthquake. News channels across continents blared the impossible story: Soviet submarine washes ashore in Caribbean. Cold War ghost emerges from depths. The image of the massive, barnacle-encrusted hull, juxtaposed against the pristine Caribbean beach, became an instant, iconic symbol of an era that refused to be forgotten. For the small, unassuming island nation, it was a sudden, unwelcome spotlight. They were a peaceful, sovereign state, but now found themselves thrust onto the front lines of an international incident, a diplomatic chessboard where superpowers played for keeps. Their local authorities, accustomed to mundane island affairs, were utterly overwhelmed. The initial cordon around the submarine was laughably ineffective against the onslaught of curious locals, scrambling journalists, and more ominously, the quiet, suited figures who began to materialize from off-island flights. From Washington, D.C., the reaction was immediate and intense. American intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA and the Office of Naval Intelligence, went into overdrive. A Soviet foxtrot in the Caribbean was not just a historical curiosity, it was a treasure trove of information. Imagine having physical access to a working Soviet submarine, its sonar systems, its communications gear, its cryptographic devices, even its internal blueprints. This was an opportunity to glean insights into Soviet naval capabilities that could take decades to acquire through conventional espionage. The problem was, it was on foreign soil, in a sovereign nation that technically owed allegiance to no one in this particular cold conflict. The U.S. couldn't just walk in and claim it, not without sparking a massive international incident and potentially revealing its own covert activities in the region. Simultaneously, from Moscow, the silence was chilling. There were no official statements, no claims of a lost vessel, no inquiries about a missing crew. This deliberate non-response was, in itself, a powerful message. It suggested extreme embarrassment, a mission so secret it had to be disavowed entirely, or perhaps a desperate attempt to contain the fallout from a catastrophic failure. The very lack of information became a source of intense speculation and fear. What were they hiding? Why would they let such a valuable asset remain unclaimed? Within days, the small island, previously known only for its stunning beaches and laid-back pace, became a hive of covert activity. Diplomats arrived, ostensibly to offer technical assistance or environmental consultation, but their true motives were thinly veiled. Among them were intelligence operatives, disguised as scientists, engineers, and even maritime archaeologists. They all had one goal: to get inside that submarine. The U.S. sent naval engineers and intelligence analysts, subtly integrated into a fact-finding mission. The British, always keen to understand Soviet tech, sent their own experts. Even smaller European powers, eager for a piece of the intelligence pie, dispatched observers. It was a silent, intense battle for access, played out in hushed conversations and tense diplomatic meetings. The local government, a small administration with limited resources, suddenly found itself in the unenviable position of negotiating with global giants. On one hand, they needed assistance. Moving and securing a massive, abandoned submarine was well beyond their capabilities. On the other hand, they were fiercely protective of their sovereignty. They feared that allowing any one superpower unfettered access would inevitably compromise their neutrality and turn them into a pawn in a larger game. They tried to establish rules, to demand transparency, but they quickly learned that in the world of espionage, rules were often mere suggestions, and transparency was a dangerous illusion. The immediate challenge was securing the sub itself. Its size alone made it difficult. Local police, armed with rifles, patrolled the perimeter, but they were no match for determined intelligence operatives who saw only opportunity. There were reports of attempted covert entries under the cover of darkness, quickly thwarted by an increasingly vigilant local military presence. Salvage experts were called in, but the sheer logistics were daunting. This wasn't a sunken treasure ship. It was a massive, waterlogged steel tube, potentially unstable, possibly booby-trapped, and definitely full of unknown hazards. The question wasn't just how to move it, but where to move it. Towing it to a major naval base would be the obvious choice for analysis, but which nation's base? The political implications of such a decision were enormous. Meanwhile, the local community, initially gripped by fear and awe, began to experience the more immediate effects of this global intrusion. Their quiet fishing village was now a bustling, somewhat chaotic hub. Foreign money flowed in, but so did suspicion and veiled threats. Fishermen like Leo and Clara, the accidental protagonists, found themselves under intense scrutiny. They were questioned repeatedly, their story dissected, analyzed for any inconsistencies, any hidden motives. They were just fishermen, but they had inadvertently caught the biggest fish in the world, and now they were caught in its net. The diplomatic tug-of-war intensified. The U.S., with its significant regional influence, pushed hard for access, citing environmental concerns and the potential danger of ordnance. They hinted at providing substantial aid in exchange for cooperation. Other nations, wary of U.S. dominance, argued for an international UN-supervised investigation, but this was slow and bureaucratic, and intelligence agencies abhorred bureaucracy. The clock was ticking. Every day the submarine sat there, exposed to the elements and potential infiltration, was a missed opportunity, a security risk. The decision was made. Under immense international pressure, and with the promise of substantial aid and technical assistance, the island nation reluctantly agreed to an international team, primarily led by American and British salvage experts, to attempt to breach and secure the submarine. This was no ordinary salvage operation. This was a surgical strike against a Cold War enigma. The risks were astronomical. A submarine, especially one that had been underwater for an unknown period, was a pressure cooker of potential hazards. Trapped gases, unstable ordnance, decaying biological matter, even booby traps, any of these could turn the operation into a deadly disaster. The team that assembled was an elite cadre of specialists, naval architects, bomb disposal experts, deep-sea divers, atmospheric scientists, and of course, intelligence analysts masquerading as something else. Their first task was a meticulous external survey. Remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, painstakingly scanned every inch of the hull, searching for weaknesses, for signs of tampering, for any clue as to what might have transpired. The barnacles and marine growth were carefully removed in key areas to reveal any markings or damage. What they found was both reassuring and perplexing. The hull was largely intact, no torpedo damage, no evidence of a catastrophic collision. This deepened the mystery of its abandonment. If it hadn't been attacked, why was it left behind? The primary point of entry was identified as the main access hatch in the conning tower. This was a reinforced, watertight portal designed to withstand immense pressure. Opening it required not just brute force, but precision engineering. Special cutting tools were brought in, meticulously calibrated to slice through decades of rust and seized mechanisms without causing internal damage or triggering any unforeseen hazards. The air around the submarine was thick with tension. Soldiers stood guard, their rifles pointed not at an enemy, but at a silent, brooding hulk. Media helicopters buzzed overhead, capturing every agonizing moment. The day of the breach was a spectacle. Under the blazing Caribbean sun, the salvage team, clad in specialized protective gear, worked with a methodical intensity. Every clang of metal, every groan of protesting steel echoed across the water. Hours crawled by. Then, with a sudden, sharp pop and a hiss of escaping pressure, the outer hatch finally yielded. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. This was it. The moment of truth. What greeted them was not a burst of toxic gas or a booby trap, but something even more unsettling, the absolute silence of a preserved void. The internal atmosphere was stagnant, cold, and heavy with the smell of stale air, decaying metal, and something indefinably organic. The initial entry team, equipped with respirators and environmental sensors, slowly descended into the submarine's dimly lit interior. Their powerful headlamps cut through the oppressive darkness, illuminating a scene frozen in time. The first impression was one of stark preservation. It wasn't a flooded wreck, nor a charred inferno. It was as if the crew had simply walked away. Clothes hung neatly in lockers, papers lay on desks, even personal items like photographs and playing cards were scattered as if left mid-game. The silence was profound, broken only by the muffled sounds of their own breathing and the soft splash of dripping water. This wasn't the chaotic aftermath of a disaster. It was the eerie stillness of an abandoned home. They moved methodically, compartment by compartment. The torpedo room was first, then the crew quarters, the galley, the engine room, and finally, the control room, the nerve center of the entire vessel. Each space offered fragments of a story, hints of daily life abruptly interrupted. Logbooks, damp but legible in places, confirmed the vessel's identity as a Soviet Foxtrot-class submarine, its designation a numeric code. Dates within the logs were decades old, confirming it had been lost during the height of the Cold War. The last entry was chillingly mundane, a routine patrol report, giving no indication of impending doom or emergency. But the most shocking discovery wasn't a dead crew, nor was it massive battle damage. It was the absence of a crew, coupled with the bizarre state of the control room. The instruments, though decades old, were astonishingly well preserved. Many of the gauges were at zero, indicating a system shutdown. The lights were off, power completely drained. The submarine had been powered down, seemingly in an orderly fashion. No frantic alarms, no red warning lights. It suggested a controlled, deliberate process, not a sudden emergency. But why power down in the middle of a patrol and then abandon the vessel? Then the final, most baffling discovery in the control room. A single, open logbook. Not the ship's official log, but a personal journal, tucked away beneath a console. Its pages, though water-stained, were remarkably preserved. Written in Cyrillic in a flowing hand, it detailed not operational data, but personal reflections, observations, and finally, a series of increasingly cryptic entries about a special mission, a secret rendezvous, and a growing sense of unease among the crew. The last legible entry, dated days before the estimated abandonment, spoke of an unavoidable choice and a new path. The enigma of the vanished crew quickly became the central puzzle. 35 highly trained Soviet submariners, specialists in covert operations and extended deep-sea patrols, do not simply disappear. Their lives were dedicated to their vessel, their loyalty to the state absolute. Mutiny was virtually unthinkable in the Soviet military of that era, especially on such a sensitive asset. A mass defection, while possible, would have left a trail. A public defection of such a large and valuable group would have been impossible to conceal entirely. Yet, the submarine offered no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no evidence of a violent end for its human complement. Investigators meticulously scoured every inch of the submarine for clues to the crew's fate. They examined the life rafts, still stowed in their compartments, unused. They checked the escape hatches, all sealed from the inside, indicating no emergency exit had been made. The submarine's internal systems, once powered up and carefully analyzed, revealed even more perplexing data. While the main power was off, many non-essential systems, like the galley refrigeration unit, showed signs of being manually shut down, not failed catastrophically. The navigation logs indicated a deliberate course change in the days leading up to its abandonment, taking it far off its expected patrol route, deep into a remote, less trafficked sector of the Caribbean. The personal journal, now painstakingly translated, became the most compelling yet frustrating piece of evidence. Written by a lieutenant commander, it painted a picture of a crew under immense stress, but not from an enemy attack. It spoke of increasingly unusual orders from Moscow, a growing sense of isolation, and a feeling that they were being used as pawns in a much larger, darker game. The entries became more philosophical, questioning the meaning of their mission, the sacrifices they were asked to make. The final entries were chillingly vague, hinting at an extraction and a new life, but also a profound sense of loss and sacrifice. It explicitly mentioned orders to disable the submarine but leave it intact for a future retrieval that may never come. This suggested not an emergency, but a planned, albeit extreme, operation. But what kind of operation would require an entire submarine crew to vanish without a trace, leaving behind their vessel, presumably to never be heard from again? The theories began to multiply. The advanced espionage equipment found within the sub, though partially damaged by the elements, offered further tantalizing clues. Acoustic sensors capable of mapping vast swathes of the ocean floor, encrypted communication devices unlike anything the West had seen, and photographic equipment designed for clandestine shore reconnaissance. This was a vessel built not just for patrol, but for deep penetration, for silent observation, for gathering intelligence of the highest order. The very nature of its mission suggested secrets too profound to ever be openly acknowledged. The lack of any definitive answer about the crew, despite the wealth of circumstantial evidence within the submarine, became the most haunting aspect of the entire discovery. The submarine was a silent testament to human ingenuity and the terrifying stakes of the Cold War. But its emptiness, its complete lack of human remains, transformed it into something else entirely, a memorial to a vanished crew whose ultimate fate remained a blank space in history. It posed a chilling question. Could an entire group of individuals be erased so thoroughly, so completely, that their disappearance became an unsolvable riddle, even when their vessel resurfaced decades later? The moment the main hatch of the Foxtrot was pried open, the submarine transformed from a derelict ghost ship into the hottest piece of intelligence real estate on the planet. For Western powers, particularly the United States, this was an unparalleled, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Imagine having full, unrestricted access to an enemy's top-tier war machine, its design, its technology, its operational capabilities, even its vulnerabilities. This wasn't just finding a forgotten notebook. This was finding the entire library, abandoned and unlocked. The pressure to extract every possible scrap of information was immense, bordering on feverish. Elite teams of engineers, cryptographers, sonar specialists, and intelligence analysts, drawn from the deepest recesses of the U.S. Navy and CIA, swarmed the vessel. They worked around the clock, under the watchful eyes of international observers, but always with their own clandestine agenda. Every component, every wire, every switch was meticulously catalogued, photographed, and often carefully removed for deeper analysis back in specialized labs. The internal structure, the layout of the control room, the design of the torpedo tubes, every detail offered a window into Soviet naval doctrine and engineering. The focus was intense on the submarine's sensory and communication systems. The sonar arrays, despite years of submersion, offered critical insights into Soviet acoustic technology. Could they detect American subs from farther away? Were their silent running techniques as advanced as believed? The communication center, a dense tangle of wires and black boxes, was a particular goldmine. Cryptographic equipment, even if powered down, could reveal patterns, coding techniques, and potentially even keys, allowing Western intelligence to decipher decades of intercepted Soviet communications. It was a digital archaeology project, piecing together fragments of a lost language. Navigation systems, too, were scrutinized. What were their charting methods? How accurate were their internal gyroscopes and inertial navigation units? The data could reveal Soviet patrol routes, their interest in specific geographical areas, and their operational range. Even the mundane components, like the quality of the welds or the materials used in the pressure hull, offered insights into their industrial capabilities and potential weaknesses. This wasn't just about what the sub did. It was about what the sub was, from the smallest bolt to the largest propeller blade. One of the most tantalizing discoveries came from the data storage devices, primitive by modern standards, but revolutionary for their time. Magnetic tapes and punch cards, designed to log mission parameters, sensor readings, and tactical data. Extracting information from these degraded formats was a Herculean task, requiring highly specialized equipment and techniques. But when successful, the rewards were immense. Fragments of mission logs, acoustic signatures of vessels they had tracked, even recordings of underwater geographical features, all painting a clearer picture of Soviet naval activity in the most sensitive regions of the world. However, the operation was a delicate balancing act. While the Western powers were desperate to extract every secret, they also needed to be cautious. The discovery of the Foxtrot was an undeniable geopolitical bombshell. Moscow's silence was unnerving. Was it genuine ignorance or a strategic ploy? What if the Soviets were watching, monitoring the salvage operation, assessing how much the West was learning? Revealing the full extent of their capabilities to extract sensitive data might compromise future intelligence operations. So, a dance of deception began, public statements emphasizing the general age of the sub, while covertly, the most advanced intelligence gathering was underway. The island nation found itself in an impossible position. They were technically the owners of the derelict vessel, but they lacked the resources, expertise, and political clout to handle it. They had to navigate the demands of the U.S., the subtle threats from the Soviets through diplomatic channels, and the overall international spotlight. They tried to assert their sovereignty, demanding transparency and a share of any discoveries. But in the realpolitik of the Cold War, a small nation's demands often took a back seat to superpower interests. In the end, under the guise of environmental safety and technical assistance, the U.S. effectively took charge of the vessel, moving it to a secure, undisclosed location for in-depth analysis. For the Soviet Union, the discovery was a profound strategic embarrassment. Not only had one of their submarines gone missing for decades without a trace, but it had resurfaced in enemy hands, a complete gift of intelligence. The silence from Moscow wasn't just about containing a secret. It was about managing an international humiliation of monumental proportions. To acknowledge the sub would be to admit its loss, to reveal its mission, and to expose a catastrophic failure in their command and control. The loss of face would be immense, and the strategic implications devastating. The best course of action from their perspective was to simply pretend it didn't exist. Even after the submarine was thoroughly picked apart, its technological secrets laid bare, the central mystery of its vanished crew persisted, an open wound in the annals of Cold War history. 35 lives, erased without a trace, leaving behind only an empty steel shell and a few cryptic journal entries. The lack of resolution has kept the story alive, fueling speculation and conspiracy theories for decades. Each theory tries to fill the void, to make sense of an event that defies conventional explanation. Theory 1. The mass defection, a new life beyond the Iron Curtain. This theory posits that the entire crew, or at least a significant portion of them, orchestrated a meticulously planned defection. Perhaps they were disillusioned with the Soviet system, tired of the constant pressure, or simply lured by the promise of freedom and a better life in the West. The fact that the submarine was meticulously powered down and left intact suggests a level of planning that would be consistent with a prearranged defection. However, the challenges with this theory are immense. How do you secretly move 35 highly trained military personnel, often with families back home, through secure Soviet channels and into Western hands without any intelligence leaks? No Western intelligence agency, not the CIA, not MI6, ever publicly claimed such a massive defection. Such a propaganda coup would have been impossible to resist. If they defected to a non-aligned nation, that nation also kept an unprecedented secret. The sheer scale and secrecy required make a full crew defection highly improbable without leaving any historical footprint. Theory 2. Deep cover reassignment, the ultimate erasure. This theory, considered by many intelligence professionals to be the most chillingly plausible, suggests the crew wasn't defecting, but rather being reassigned by their own government. The journal entries, speaking of an unavoidable choice and a new path, hint at this. Imagine a mission so sensitive, so long-term, that the very identities of its participants had to be completely eradicated. The crew would be extracted by another Soviet vessel or operatives. Their lives as submariners ended, and they would be given new identities, new lives, perhaps in deep cover espionage within Western countries or as sleeper agents. The abandonment of the submarine would then become a crucial part of the operation, a stage prop for their disappearance. Leaving the submarine intact but disabled would be a psychological tactic, a way to ensure the crew's death was believable, while potentially setting up a future retrieval that never materialized or was deemed too risky after the sub was discovered. This theory aligns with the Soviet Union's known practices of extreme secrecy and its willingness to sacrifice individuals for strategic gain. It also explains the lack of official acknowledgement. To admit such a program existed would expose a level of ruthlessness and strategic depth that even the Cold War's architects preferred to keep hidden. Theory 3. Experimental mission gone horribly wrong, the unspeakable truth. This theory, while veering into conspiracy, cannot be entirely dismissed. The Cold War was a period of intense scientific and military experimentation, often pushing the boundaries of ethics and safety. What if the Foxtrot was engaged in an experimental mission, perhaps testing a new propulsion system, a radical form of biological or chemical agent deployment, or even some form of psychological warfare that involved extreme isolation? The unavoidable choice could refer to a forced participation in a dangerous experiment. Such an experiment went catastrophically wrong, not in a way that destroyed the sub, but in a way that rendered the crew incapacitated, perhaps mentally altered, or exposed to something that necessitated their immediate covert removal and containment. Then the vessel would be abandoned. Moscow's silence would then stem from a desperate need to cover up a disastrous, potentially illegal, or morally reprehensible scientific failure. Theory 4. Internal purge or false flag, the betrayal within. Some darker scenarios suggest the crew might have been deliberately eliminated by their own side. Perhaps they discovered something within the Soviet hierarchy, a plot, a massive corruption, or a strategic blunder that made them a liability. Or perhaps they were sacrificed as part of a sophisticated false flag operation, designed to confuse or mislead Western intelligence. This would involve internal agents executing the crew and staging the abandonment to look like something else entirely. While extreme, the history of Cold War espionage is filled with such brutal realities. The personal journal, recovered from the control room, remains the most tantalizing and frustrating piece of evidence. Its vague allusions, its emotional weight, and its ultimate ambiguity serve to fuel all these theories without definitively proving any. It's a narrative void, designed to be filled by speculation. For intelligence agencies, the file on the Foxtrot crew remains in many ways open, a silent challenge, a constant reminder of the depths of human secrecy. The psychological impact of such an unresolved mystery is immense. It speaks to the ultimate expendability of human lives in the grand chess game of nations. The story of the Foxtrot-class submarine, hauled from the depths by the improbable catch of Leo and Clara, transcends mere historical curiosity. It stands as a powerful, multi-layered metaphor for the Cold War itself, and a stark reminder that history is never truly buried. Its legacy echoes in various ways, touching upon the lives of ordinary people, the machinations of global powers, and the enduring nature of secrets. First, there are Leo and Clara, the accidental protagonists. Their lives, once defined by the rhythmic predictability of the sea, were irrevocably altered. They went from anonymous fishermen to global figures, their names synonymous with an impossible discovery. Their courage, their stubborn refusal to let go of what they thought was a monstrous catch, inadvertently dragged a global secret into the harsh light of day. They were not spies, not politicians, not soldiers, yet their simple act changed the course of an intelligence operation. Their story reminds us that even in the largest, most complex geopolitical struggles, individual actions, however small or unintended, can have monumental ripple effects. While they likely received some compensation and recognition, their privacy, their peaceful existence, was forever shattered by the weight of their discovery. The small island nation also grappled with an unprecedented challenge. Thrust from obscurity into the international spotlight, it was forced to navigate the treacherous currents of superpower diplomacy. Its government, initially overwhelmed, managed to assert a degree of sovereignty, albeit with difficulty. The event highlighted the precarious position of smaller nations caught in the crosscurrents of global power struggles, often becoming unwitting stages for conflicts far beyond their control. It taught them, and perhaps other similar nations, that even in weakness, there is a capacity for resilience and the assertion of national dignity. For the world at large, the Foxtrot's surfacing was a visceral reminder of the hidden front lines of the Cold War. It exposed the pervasive, often unseen battles fought daily beneath the waves, in the airwaves, and in the shadows. The submarine, a silent predator, symbolized the constant threat of nuclear annihilation, the intricate dance of espionage, and the moral ambiguities that defined that era. It was a physical manifestation of fear and technological prowess, showing us just how close the world constantly teetered on the brink, far away from the public eye. The saga of the Foxtrot also offers profound insights into the nature of state secrecy. The Soviet Union's absolute silence, their complete refusal to acknowledge the loss of an entire vessel and its crew, speaks volumes. It demonstrates the lengths to which states will go to protect sensitive operations, even if it means erasing human lives from existence. The mystery of the crew's disappearance becomes a chilling lesson in the dehumanizing aspects of statecraft during periods of intense geopolitical competition. It forces us to ask, at what cost is national security pursued? And are there limits to the secrets a government should be allowed to keep from its own people, let alone the world? In a contemporary context, the story resonates deeply. We live in an age of renewed geopolitical tensions, with new forms of shadow warfare and advanced stealth technologies. The questions posed by the Foxtrot about intelligence gathering, state-sponsored disappearances, the moral boundaries of espionage, and the accidental entanglement of civilians in global conflicts are as relevant today as they were decades ago. The ghost of the Foxtrot submarine reminds us that the lessons of the Cold War are not merely historical footnotes. They are ongoing warnings, challenging us to remain vigilant, to question official narratives, and to understand the unseen forces that continue to shape our world. The ultimate disposition of the Foxtrot-class submarine remains a subject of some debate and continued speculation, a fitting end for a vessel so steeped in mystery. While its exact location and current state are highly classified, it is widely believed that after extensive analysis by Western intelligence agencies, it was ultimately dismantled, its components studied in minute detail, and its hull eventually disposed of in a manner that prevented any further reclamation or symbolic significance. Some speculate parts of it might be in secret museums or training facilities, a trophy of the Cold War's silent battles. Regardless of its physical fate, its story endures, a powerful testament to a time when silence often spoke louder than words, and the most profound truths were found in the depths, or brought to the surface by the most unexpected hands. The fisherman and his wife, the silent giant, the vanished crew, their interconnected tale is a mosaic of human courage, geopolitical intrigue, and the enduring power of the unknown. It's a story that reminds us that beneath the calm surface of our daily lives, history often lies waiting, ready to resurface and challenge everything we thought we knew. The fictional narrative of Leo and Clara, the Caribbean fisherman and his wife who inadvertently caught a Soviet Foxtrot-class submarine, serves as a powerful and deeply resonant allegory for numerous real-world phenomena and historical realities, particularly those stemming from the Cold War. While the specific event is a dramatic construct, its components are steeped in factual historical context, geopolitical anxieties, and enduring human dilemmas. This story and its construction taps into profound truths about secrecy, power, the human cost of conflict, and the unpredictable ways in which history can resurface. At its core, the story hinges on the extraordinary premise of ordinary people stumbling upon an immense state secret. This narrative device is compelling because it mirrors a fundamental human experience: the unexpected confrontation with forces far beyond one's control or understanding. In the real world, while no fisherman has literally caught a submarine with a fishing line, there have been instances where civilian activity or natural forces have brought hidden military secrets to light. The most famous real-world parallel to this narrative is Project Azorian, the CIA's top-secret mission to recover parts of the sunken Soviet submarine K-129 in 1974, using the specially built salvage ship Glomar Explorer. K-129, a Golf-II-class ballistic missile submarine, sank in 1968 in the Pacific Ocean with all hands lost. The Soviets conducted a search, failed to locate it, and ultimately declared it lost. However, the U.S. Navy had tracked it, and seeing an unparalleled intelligence opportunity, launched Project Azorian to retrieve it. This mission, revealed publicly only years later, partially due to a plumbing company's request for return of a claw used in the recovery, demonstrates the absolute lengths to which superpowers would go to obtain enemy technology and secrets. The initial discovery in our fictional narrative, Leo and Clara's inadvertent snag, serves a similar function to a natural phenomenon or an intelligence leak that forces a secret into the open. It highlights the vulnerability of even the most elaborate covert operations to unforeseen circumstances, and the powerful human impulse to uncover what is hidden. The fact that it's discovered by simple, honest working people adds a layer of irony and underlines the idea that the grand games of nations can be profoundly affected by the most humble players. The choice of a Soviet Foxtrot-class submarine is no accident. These diesel-electric submarines were workhorses of the Soviet Navy, designed for long patrols, anti-submarine warfare, and, crucially, intelligence gathering. During the Cold War, the underwater domain was arguably the most critical and secretive battleground. Submarines offered 1. Stealth. They could operate unseen, collecting intelligence, mapping the seabed, and positioning themselves for attack or defense without detection. 2. Strategic deterrence. Ballistic missile submarines like the real K-129 were key to second strike capabilities, guaranteeing retaliation in a nuclear exchange. 3. Intelligence gathering. As depicted in the script, Foxtrots were equipped with advanced sonar, communication interception gear, and reconnaissance equipment, making them mobile spy platforms. The Caribbean, as the setting, is equally significant. The region was a major Cold War flashpoint, most famously during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Soviet submarines, including Foxtrots, were regularly deployed to the region to monitor U.S. naval activity, conduct surveillance, and project Soviet power. The presence of a Soviet submarine in these waters was not unusual during the Cold War. Its discovery decades later, abandoned, is what makes the fictional story compelling. It anchors the fiction in a historical reality where the unseen presence of such vessels profoundly shaped geopolitical dynamics. The core mystery of the script, the vanished crew of 35, is perhaps the most potent and haunting element, drawing directly from real Cold War fears and known practices. The theories explored in the script for the crew's disappearance, mass defection, deep cover reassignment, experimental mission gone wrong, internal purge, all find echoes, however faint or indirect, in actual Cold War events and anxieties. Defections. High-profile defections of Soviet military and intelligence personnel were a recurring feature of the Cold War. While an entire submarine crew defecting is unprecedented, the fear of such an event, and the Western powers' eagerness to exploit any such opportunity was very real. Deep cover erasure of identity. The world of espionage, particularly during the Cold War, involved extraordinary measures to protect agents and operations, including creating new identities and severing all ties to past lives. The idea of an entire crew being erased for a deep cover mission, while extreme, taps into the ruthlessness and the ends justify the means mentality that often characterized superpower intelligence operations. Experimental missions gone wrong. Both the US and the USSR engaged in highly secretive, often dangerous military and scientific experiments. Accidents happened, and the details were often suppressed for decades, if not forever. The possibility of a secret experiment causing an incident that necessitated the crew's covert removal is not beyond the realm of Cold War reality. Internal purge elimination. While perhaps the most dramatic, the history of totalitarian regimes, including the Soviet Union under Stalin, includes episodes of mass purges and the systematic elimination of those deemed a threat or a liability. The script's suggestion of an unavoidable choice, or a new path, could subtly imply state-sanctioned removal rather than a voluntary act. The script vividly portrays the frantic scramble by Western powers to access the submarine and extract its secrets. This aspect is perhaps the most grounded in historical reality, directly mirroring the motivations behind Project Azorian. Recovering an enemy submarine offered. Technological insights. Understanding its propulsion, navigation, sonar acoustic signatures, and weapon systems, e.g. torpedo design, nuclear warhead safety features if applicable. This allowed for countermeasures and a better understanding of enemy capabilities. Cryptographic secrets, access to communication equipment, codebooks, and cipher machines could allow intelligence agencies to break enemy codes, decipher past communications, and anticipate future actions. This was arguably the most valuable intelligence. Operational doctrine. The layout of the control room, the types of equipment, and the training materials could reveal how the enemy operated, their tactical thinking, and their vulnerabilities. Strategic intent. Even fragments of mission logs or maps could indicate areas of particular interest to the Soviets, helping to predict future deployments or strategic objectives. The Cold War was an intelligence war, and a captured submarine was the ultimate prize, equivalent to capturing an entire enemy spy agency's headquarters. The fictional description of analysts swarming the vessel, carefully cataloging every detail, and laboring to extract data from old storage devices, accurately reflects the painstaking and highly technical process of intelligence exploitation. The fictional island nation's predicament is a classic illustration of the challenges faced by smaller, less powerful countries during the Cold War. They found themselves caught between powerful blocs, their sovereignty often leveraged or ignored in the pursuit of superpower interests. Unwanted attention. The discovery thrusts the obscure island into an international spotlight it never sought, disrupting its way of life. Sovereignty versus leverage. The local government tries to assert control, but ultimately lacks the resources and political capital to fully resist the demands of more powerful nations. They are forced to negotiate, offer concessions, and potentially compromise their neutrality in exchange for aid or protection. Covert operations. The arrival of diplomats and experts, who are secretly intelligence operatives, reflects the pervasive nature of covert activity, where nations employed non-military means to achieve strategic objectives. The price of neutrality. In a deeply divided world, true neutrality was often a difficult, if not impossible, position to maintain. The island's struggle to control the narrative and the access to the sub embodies this real-world dilemma. The fictional story, while set in the past, carries profound and ongoing relevance to the contemporary world. 1. The persistence of secrecy and shadow conflicts. Even after the formal end of the Cold War, state secrets, intelligence operations, and geopolitical maneuvering continue. The Foxtrot story reminds us that beneath the surface of official narratives, complex and often hidden conflicts are constantly being waged. This is particularly relevant in an era of renewed great power competition and advanced cyber warfare. 2. The human cost of geopolitics. The vanished crew is the most poignant symbol of this. Their individual lives were subsumed by state interests, their fates rendered irrelevant in the grand scheme of strategic advantage. The story forces us to contemplate the ethics of state power and the profound sacrifice demanded of individuals in service of national security. 3. The power of unresolved mysteries. The enduring fascination with the Foxtrot's crew mirrors our collective human need for closure and understanding. Unresolved mysteries, especially those involving disappearance and potential betrayal, tap into primal fears and fuel endless speculation. This is why stories like the USS Scorpion, MH370, or even the Dyatlov Pass incident continue to captivate. 4. The unexpected impact of ordinary people. Leo and Clara's role underscores that history is not solely shaped by kings and generals. Ordinary citizens, through their actions or even happenstance, can trigger events with global ramifications. It highlights the vulnerability of the most powerful systems to the most mundane occurrences. 5. Historical amnesia and resurfacing truths. The submarine literally resurfacing decades later serves as a metaphor for history itself. What we believe is settled or forgotten can suddenly re-emerge, challenging our understanding of the past and forcing us to reevaluate its implications for the present. This is particularly relevant as historical archives are declassified or new evidence comes to light, continually reshaping our historical narratives. In conclusion, the story of the Caribbean fisherman, his wife, and the Soviet ghost submarine is a masterclass in fictional storytelling grounded in historical anxieties. It meticulously weaves together elements of real Cold War history, naval technology, intelligence operations, and the ethical dilemmas of state power into a compelling narrative. Its significance lies not just in its entertainment value, but in its ability to illuminate the profound and often chilling realities of a bygone era, while simultaneously offering enduring lessons about secrecy, human vulnerability, and the unpredictable ways in which the past can continue to haunt and shape our present. The Foxtrot's mystery is a singular event, but it's far from the only time a military vessel has vanished without a trace, only to reappear under bizarre circumstances, challenging our understanding of what's possible. If you were captivated by the silent disappearance of the Foxtrot's crew, you won't believe the true story of the USS Scorpion, an American nuclear submarine that vanished with all hands, leaving behind a mystery that continues to haunt the U.S. Navy to this day. Click here to watch our deep dive.